welcome to the annual report, a special edition of the Comptroller's Corner. I'm your host, Pat Curry, joined as always by Buffalo Comptroller Mark Schroeder. Over the next hour, we're going to take a look at the top stories of 2013, as well as taking a look at the year ahead. Now, Mark, it's been a busy year. We have a lot of topics to cover today. I want to start by discussing the comprehensive annual financial report. Now, this is a document produced by your office that takes an in-depth look at the city's finances. This year's highlight of the CAFR, as it's called, is that the fund balance is at $166 million. Now, while this record level fund balance is an indicator of Buffalo's financial strength, these reserves are going to be needed to meet upcoming expenses in the near future.
Right, Patrick. And first of all, I mean, the city of Buffalo has been required since its incorporation, 1832, to provide an annual report. This is a comprehensive financial annual report, as you've mentioned, and I'm very proud of the accounting department for all of their work under the leadership of Bill Ferguson, who's a CPA, who runs that department. And over the last 7 years, that department has received awards from the GFOA.
The Government Finance Officers Association.
Which means it's good work in a timely fashion. And also, just last month, we presented one of the employees in accounting with an award, the Rowan Award. Initiative is doing the right thing without being told, and that is Frank Cahill. So I am so very proud of the accounting department for helping us in the Comptroller's office produce this financial report. And you are absolutely correct. The rating agencies are going to continue to look at us in a positive way. We're going to continue to be in the A category because of that fund balance that you mentioned. And even though the fund balance, even though it's a record fund balance, there are some requirements in the next year and some of the out years where that reserve, that area, that money needs to be used to fulfill certain things that the city are obligated to.
Now, there's certainly many challenges financially for the city of Buffalo moving forward, especially with the declining or stagnant revenues coupled with growth in expenses, especially for healthcare costs and pension costs. Now, many municipalities across the state are feeling this fiscal stress worse than Buffalo, and the state has set up a fiscal stress monitoring system. And in fact, the state Senate held a series of hearings across the state of New York, and you testified at a hearing in August, and you were happy to report that while Buffalo does have its fiscal challenges, it's not currently in fiscal stress.
Right. This is something where I was the first elected comptroller in the state of New York to support and endorse publicly Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, who's established this fiscally distressed municipalities as a tool for municipalities. If they're having trouble, here are certain things, criterions to look at and to do better. And as you report, Patrick, the city of Buffalo is in very, very good shape. We will not be called a fiscally distressed city by the comptroller when he comes and does his announcement here in Buffalo, like he's done in other municipalities across New York State. And quite frankly, and in all due respect to the comptroller, I, as comptroller, am not going to wait until the state comptroller identifies certain areas of concern. I have in my office, as you know, a certified public accountant, Claire Waldron, and one of the tasks that she has is to take a look at all of the criterion that the state comptroller is looking at, so I know well in advance, before any announcement that's coming from the state comptroller, whether we're fiscally sound or not, and we are fiscally sound.
Now, you mentioned the accounting division is a component of your office, and they're doing great work overseeing the city's finances. Another division in your office is the Division of Audit. Now, the top story of this year for the Division of Audit was the Erie Basin Marina. There was an audit that identified $343,000 worth of revenue due to the city of Buffalo and counting. We actually did a special report on Comptroller's Corner about the Erie Basin Marina on that. So for more on the Erie Basin Marina, stay tuned for this Comptroller's Corner special report. I'm here at the Erie Basin Marina, a popular destination on Buffalo's waterfront, built by the city in 1974. Over the past 2 years, the city has borrowed nearly $2 million for capital improvements at the marina, which includes the Hatch restaurant. To make sure the city was getting the proper return on its investment, Comptroller Schroeder decided to look into the revenue generated by this city asset. His audit found that Brand-On Services, the company hired to run the marina, owes the city nearly $350,000 after underpaying its rent in each of the past 5 years. The contract with Brand-On Services requires the vendor to pay the city a percentage of revenue generated from sales at the marina for things such as food, gas, and slip rentals. The audit found that more than $164,000 worth of food sales went unreported to the city, and that more than 20,000 gallons of gas is completely unaccounted for. Over the past 4 decades, the city has made some significant investments in the Erie Basin Marina. Now, Mark, you wanted to ensure that taxpayers were getting their money's worth.
Especially because I know the history of this, Patrick. In 1974, this is what I would call a legacy project. It began with then Mayor Stanley Makowski and his vision that there would be public access here at the Erie Basin Marina, but it also would spur development, mixed use development all around the Erie Basin Marina. And then in 1977, Mayor Jimmy Griffin embraced the Erie Basin Marina. And in my view, this really is the beginning of the great work that Congressman Brian Higgins is doing now around the water's edge. This was the foundation. And so I believe it's very important that we do everything we can to protect the citizens of Buffalo by making sure the vendors who are hired through a process are doing the right thing and giving the correct revenues back to the city of Buffalo.
Now, I mentioned the gas that was unaccounted for. Brand-On's fuel supplier told city auditors that it had provided them with 383,000 gallons worth of gas. Yet Brand-On told the city that they only sold 363,000.
Yeah.
You want to know what happened to that other 20,000 gallons of gas?
Of course, but it's very telling that the Brand-On suppliers told our auditors what the real amount is. And so, therefore, of course, we want to know what happened to the other 20,000 gallons. And there's a lot of implications to that. And so it's an important question. We raised it through the audit, and we believe there are going to be several sources coming forward to be able to help answer, what happened to that missing gasoline.
Now, not only was gasoline missing, but they also underpaid on the gas that they did report to the city. They were supposed to give the city 10% of gas sales. They were only giving the city 10 cents a gallon, which is roughly a quarter what the city was entitled to.
Yeah, this again is very problematic because if you read the contract, it's very clear that the stipulation was 10%. Not 10 cents per gallon. And quite frankly, Patrick, the only authority that can really amend the contract is the Buffalo Common Council. And through our audit process, there is no indication at all that that ever took place.
Now, a similar situation happened with food sales at the Hatch restaurant. $164,000 worth of food sales went completely unreported, and again, the sales that were reported were done at the wrong percentage calculation.
Yeah, this is something that's very, very troubling. There are several areas of revenue sources that come in to the city that were under what we really should be having.
Now, the city is owed nearly $350,000 as a result of this audit. What measures will you be taking to make sure the city gets what's owed to them?
Well, what we've done was we've been very clear. We've been clear in the audit. We've been clear in the press conference that we had last week that we have an understanding that the Commissioner of Public Works will invoice the vendor, Brand-On Services, for the appropriate amount, and it's approximately $343,000. We feel in the different areas of the audit, having to do with food, having to do with fuel, having to do with all the different aspects, that they underreported and underpaid the city of Buffalo, and we feel that it's very, very important for us to get the money back.
Now, this vendor also operates the City Hall cafeteria and operates a marina for New York Power Authority across the river and Clinton's Dish and Canal Side. What have you done about these other vendor operations this vendor has?
Well, we only have authority, a standing within the city of Buffalo. However, as a courtesy, we have alerted the other entities who have a contract with Brand-On Services that we're troubled by their work. We're troubled by them cheating the citizens of the city of Buffalo, and we wanted to give them a heads up so that they can begin to maybe look at their own books to see if there's anything that's concerning to them.
Now, there might be some potential and possible criminal wrongdoing as a part of this audit. Who else have you alerted to the findings of what your audit department found out?
Yeah, that's a good question. A couple of days ago, I paid a visit to the mayor of the city of Buffalo and suggested that it probably would be a good idea for an investigation with the Attorney General and or the U.S. Attorney General and or the district attorney, or all three. And I asked the mayor if he would like to join me in petitioning those law enforcement agencies to take a look at this audit, and he's agreed. And so we will be sending a letter to the different law enforcement agencies, giving them the audit and some of our concerns in a cover letter signed by me and by the mayor of the city of Buffalo.
Now, this isn't the first audit on the Erie Basin Marina. There were two audits completed before your time as comptroller, one in 2009 and one in 2005.
Yeah, and that is what's most troubling to me, Patrick, because in 2005, I just would like to read one quote, which was in the audit. Now, this is a previous comptroller, and it is, quote, "The lack of controls around the register allows for the possibility of understated revenues. Furthermore, the city cannot be sure that is getting the correct share of revenue." So this isn't like this is something that's just happened within the last year or so. And then in 2009, during that audit by a previous comptroller, quote, the audit said, "As a result of our audit, we have serious concerns regarding the management of the Erie Basin Marina." So in my view, back in 2009, they should have fired him. So we wouldn't be in a situation where they owe $350,000 to the citizens of Buffalo. There's some other things that were in the audit, one of which was changes in the contract without proper approval. And so I mentioned that earlier. The only one who can change anything in a contract is the Common Council. That has not been done. And then finally, in the audit of 2009, it suggested that there were major deficiencies in food, in boat launching, boat slip rentals, fuel sales, and maintaining an up-to-date slip renter's registration. I mean, what else is there? So that means everything that they were doing was deficient. So what does that mean? Fire them. And so I think because of this audit, we have been successful, and that the city administration is saying they are going through an RFP process immediately to find a new vendor, perhaps vendors, 2 or 3 vendors.
One to operate the fuel sales, one to operate the restaurant, and one to operate the marina, for instance.
Absolutely. And then finally, so what lesson do I learn from the audit of 2005? What lesson do I learn as comptroller of the city of Buffalo from the audit of 2009? The lesson I learned, this will never happen again. I have instituted in the comptroller's office what I call anniversary audits. That means every year, on the anniversary date of the audit that we've done, we are going to check, and we are going to go back to whoever the source is, whether it's the Commissioner of Public Works, whether it's the Common Council, to say, hey, listen, you have the power to do something here, or whether it's writing a press release and letting everybody know that there's no progress made, and the audit report that we did is sitting in a bookcase somewhere. We're not going to allow it. We're not going to be in a situation where 4 or 5 years later we're coming back and we say, oh, woe is us, we're owed $353,000. We've got a responsibility to do something about it, and we will, starting now.
And you're not even waiting for the first anniversary. You're already looking into some suspicious overtime. Now, the operator of Brandon, the operations director, is a former city employee. His wife is the president of Brandon. Their son is a current Department of Public Works employee. Last year, he made more than $42,000 worth of overtime. And this year, in only 9 months, he's already going to eclipse that because he's already got $36,000 in overtime in just 9 months. Yeah. Your office is looking into this, and you've requested timesheets for his work, both in the city of Buffalo and to see if he's had a role with Brandon Services here at the marina.
Yeah, that's precisely correct. And so, overtime isn't really central. Overtime pay isn't really central to this audit. And unfortunately, overtime is a reality in many municipalities, just not Buffalo. But what is concerning to me is that if an employee is making so much overtime, working a job in the city, but also allegedly is an employee of the vendor, through the relationship of his parents, that is troubling to me because there's only so much time in the day. And so one of the reasons why we're asking for timesheets from both the city of Buffalo and from Brandon Services to see if there is any situation where the citizens of Buffalo are getting a no-show for work each day because he may have responsibilities with the Erie Basin Marina. Timesheets would tell. I suspect, Patrick, that Brandon Services is going to take the letter that we wrote, probably crumble it up a little bit, either throw it in a garbage can or give it to their attorney. That is the reason why we have decided to get involved law enforcement agencies so that they can kind of look at everything and they can make their own decisions, and then I can assure them and assure the public that myself as Comptroller of the City of Buffalo, and the Mayor has assured me as well, that we will do everything we can to give the information to the law enforcement agencies as they ask for it.
Now, when you first became Comptroller, you were required to submit an audit plan to the Common Council. In that audit plan, you said you're going to be looking at sources of revenue and expenditures. Really, this audit encapsulates both because of the city's significant investment into this Erie Basin Marina with nearly $2 million in capital expenditures, and also the revenue generated by the Erie Basin Marina, which apparently, as from this audit, is not enough revenue.
Right. That's exactly right. And going back to the prelude when we first started, and I talked about the legacy project of Mayor Mikowski and Mayor Griffin. Back in those days, in 1974, the mayors infused $9 million initially and then more money. And then, of course, you referenced that $2 million just recently is going into renovating the hatch. That's a lot of money on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, when they are shortchanging us, that's a real concern. And I think what this is now, this is a message to all vendors who are operating, whether in the city limits or beyond, or within the other jurisdictions of the New York Power Authority or the Canal Corporation, that they had better be honest, they had better work by the book, they better incorporate best practices, or people like me, controllers and others, are going to begin to investigate, because this is our responsibility to make sure that the citizens of Buffalo get the revenues they deserve for their waterfront.
And Mark, since that report was broadcast on our show, the number has increased from 343 to nearly $500,000 and counting when you include the 2005 through 2007 audit years, and there's currently an audit underway for 2013, and that number that the Brandon Services owes the city of Buffalo is just going to increase. And right now, that's in arbitration. And the city's looking to get the full value for what it's owed.
Right. And so, during the report that our viewers just looked at, At that moment in time, as you suggest, it was $343,000, and since then it has escalated. But the bottom line here, no matter what the official number is, the bottom line is that the citizens of Buffalo were being underpaid through a contract with a vendor. And so that is a heads up to all. That is a heads up to the administration. It's a heads up to the Common Council that has power. They're the only ones who can amend a contract. And that's where a lot of this difficulty actually comes in and where they underpaid us. So I'm very, very grateful to the auditing department, and heading up that department also is a certified public accountant, Kevin Kaufman, and he did tremendous work along with the auditors. They did a very professional job in identifying what we were underpaid, and as you suggest, there's now an arbitration panel that will begin to determine how the citizens and the city of Buffalo will be paid back from the vendor.
Now, the audit division is also overseeing an analysis of the street light and electricity costs. Electricity accounts for roughly $16 million of the city's expenditures per year. It's the highest non-personnel related cost to the city. Now, this analysis, which will be done by Troy Banks, will be conducted in a similar fashion to an analysis that was done in the 1990s that identified more than $1 million of money due to the city of Buffalo from, at that time, Niagara Mohawk, the predecessor to National Grid, the city's current electricity vendor. So you're pretty confident that this analysis will identify additional revenue that the city should be receiving back as a result of overbillings by National Grid.
Right, that's correct, Patrick. And I think let's go back to the very first sentence that you talked about, and that is one of the things that I'm ever mindful of is on the revenue side and on the expenditure side. Mm-hmm. And that's really where we focus. We are limited. We don't have 20 and 30 and 40 different auditors. We have a very small department. So we have to focus. And it's always good to focus in on the revenue side and the expenditure side, because if you do that effectively, you're able to maybe bring in extra revenue to the city. That's exactly what we're interested in doing this street lighting analysis. It began with the Buffalo Common Council asking us to conduct this analysis. We agreed. We did it in a similar way to the 1990s and decided to do a request for proposal, finding the best organizations throughout the country to be able to say, here's what we're going to do for you. We understand how to do it. And at the end of the day, we're hopeful for the same results that came in nearly 20 years ago when nearly $2 million came into the coffers because of this analysis. So we've just underway with this, and we will continue to report to the citizens on how we're doing and how we're making progress.
Now, you mentioned the Common Council. Your audit division also looked at the way discretionary funds were dispersed by the Common Council, and in that audit, they released a series of recommendations, your audit division, on how to improve this process and bring more accountability and transparency to the way these grants are awarded. Now, you also are doing an audit which is required by the city charter that would look at the council payroll staff, council staff's payroll, and do an outside audit that is required by the city charter. And you're the first comptroller to actually comply with the charter in regards to this provision.
Right. The first opportunity that we had was as you stated, the discretionary audit, and that is whenever elected officials have an opportunity to disperse money, I believe the fiscal officer of the municipality needs to really understand what the process is. And in this particular case, Patrick, there was no process. And as you know, we put in standards even before we actually did an in-depth audit. We made it very clear to the Common Council that unless you implement some of these standards, we are not going to be sending checks out to any council member. And to their credit, they put those standards in place. And then the audit, again, our Kevin Kaufman and company, and they continue to look at this on a anniversary basis, just to make sure that some of the things that we say are being implemented. And so that was a very successful audit, and I want to really convey to the Common Council on behalf of the citizens that they're really doing a service to the city of Buffalo by complying and by doing things that are transparent. And at the same time, using taxpayer money to be helpful within their own districts. It's a win-win, and it's working. The mandatory audit, over the last 10 years, you are right. For whatever reason, previous controllers did not engage in the mandatory audit of the council. We did. And we did it in such a way that we were looking at payroll. And we've completed the audit, and now the process goes to the council president. We will be sending it to Council President Darius Pridgeon over the next couple of days. He will have 30 days to review it and then to discuss it with us. And then we believe many of the things that we've said in the audit will be implemented, and every year we will do an anniversary audit. We will make sure all of the remedies and recommendations that we're making are being implemented, or at least have a discussion on it so that it protects the citizens. That's the whole purpose for audits.
Now, your Division of Audit is also charged with playing a role in administrating the housing and urban development grants that are issued through the federal government. Now, these grants used to be administered by the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency. The federal government made a change last year, and they said that these have to be done through the city of Buffalo. That makes your office involved and the Common Council involved in the disbursement of these grants. They weren't previously involved. Now, one of the programs that is involved in these housing grants is the Emergency Roof Repair Program, or Emergency Rehab Loan Program, that takes the neediest residents of Buffalo that are in need of home repairs, like new roofs, new hot water heaters, and new furnaces, and provides them a low-interest loan in order to get these repairs. Now, there's been delays of more than 2 years for many applicants. Unfortunately, 2 applicants have passed away waiting for their new roofs, and this program has been plagued by delays and bottlenecks in getting the money out into the street. Now, you offered a solution to this program, whereas Belmont Housing Resources would play a bigger role in this, hopefully eliminating any delays. You made it clear that this is a proposed solution, but there should be a solution, even if this is not the solution.
Right.
And you are going to continue to pursue making sure this program is streamlined and expedited so that the money goes out to the people who need it the most.
Absolutely. And so throughout the course of the year, we recognized that things weren't working smoothly, that there was not execution that actually ultimately helps the constituent, especially those that are most vulnerable within the city of Buffalo. And so what we did, Patrick, is we did the best we could to communicate professionally to those who need to hear from us, but we also brought it to another level of attention. By me talking with the press and the media and explaining to them what they already knew, that there were delays. And so we weren't shy about it. We tried to do it the professional way and communicate with the administration and with those who have responsibility. But when the delays continued, we decided that we would continue to use whatever mechanism we could to bring attention to this. And we hope that over the next several months, certainly throughout the winter months, that the administration and Bureau will continue to operate in a way that is responsive to the citizens of Buffalo. And up until now, that really hasn't been the case in my view.
Now, your audit division has done an excellent job monitoring the city government and trying to find if there's anything wrong. But you also know that they can't be everywhere and they can't see everything. That's why you set up the Watchdog Hotline. Now, this citizens and residents can call, and if they see waste, fraud, or abuse in city government, they can call 8779 or go right to the city website at www.city-buffalo.com/watchdog, and they can actually make a report on what they see, and they can make sure that, and your office is guaranteed to follow up on that.
Right, yeah. This is a service that we're providing. It's not something that we discovered or that we, came up with. This is a courtesy that always seems to come out of the controller's office, whether it's the city of Buffalo and previous controllers, or whether it's the county controller or the state controller. It's a mechanism for citizens, employees, neighbors. If they see something that is awkward or that they feel isn't best practices, they feel in an anonymous way, they can make a phone call, or as you suggest, if they don't remember the number, all they really have to do is go to the controller's website. It's very, very clear what that number is. They can call, they can articulate what their concern is, and then it is our responsibility in the controller's office to follow it down, to make sure that whatever the citizen is saying or the employee, that we just take a look at it and then try to come up with a solution.
Now, Mark, we got to take a brief break. We have a full hour today, so we have many more issues to talk about when we get back. I want to discuss a little bit the rating agency's trip to Buffalo back in May.
Okay, Patrick.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Controller's Corner.
Are you unemployed, underemployed, or do you need to improve your job skills? Then the Buffalo Employment and Training Center is here for you. The Buffalo Employment and Training Center is your one-stop employment shop. Whether you need help with your search, access to information, seminars, or training, our expert and caring staff is here for you. And the best part is, all of our services are free. The Buffalo Employment and Training Center is conveniently located at 77 Goodell Street in downtown Buffalo with plenty of free parking. For more information, call 856-JOBS or visit us on the web at www.workforcebuffalo.org.
Hi, welcome back to the annual report, a special edition of the Comptroller's Corner. There's over $5.5 billion worth of construction currently in the city of Buffalo, and that number climbs up to $10 billion when including the region as a whole. In May, the Comptroller took two of the three major credit rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, on a tour of Buffalo to showcase the city's economic progress. Now you too can take the same tour the rating agencies took with this following special report by the Comptroller's Corner. The tour kicked off highlighting the progress Buffalo's made developing its waterfront. In addition to Canalside, the Erie Basin Marina, Wilkinson Point, and Gallagher Pier, it also focused on the new river parks, including Mutual's Riverfront Park and right here at Riverfest Park, more commonly known as Peg's Park, for the visionary of this park, Peg Overdorf. Now, Peg, you run a community center. Usually governments build parks. How did this park come about, and how did you lead the way?
This park came about because as part of our fundraising efforts, we run the Buffalo River Fest. But nowhere along the Buffalo River was there access to the Buffalo River to run such an event. So we went knocking door to door and found a man that was willing to sell us his property. And we worked with then Assemblyman Mark Schroeder, now City Comptroller, and we navigated all the channels and all the grants and jumped all the hurdles. And here today we have a 2-acre beautiful public access park with tons of activities and venues, and it has revitalized this community tremendously.
Now, you just had Buffalo Riverfest held here right in the park. How great was that event?
It was better attended than ever. We had more boats in our regatta than ever. People from further points are coming to the park. Last night we held one of our weekly concert series. We had people from Gowanda, we had people from Franklinville, we had people from Kenmore, we had people from Amherst. So it's not just the city dwellers taking note of all this renaissance on the Buffalo River.
Now, what's next for Peg's Park?
Next for Peg's Park is a lodge, 2-story lodge, brick lodge, very historic looking. The roof gable will resemble the New York Central Freight House that once stood here with the double chimneys, and it will have 2 balconies overlooking the river and it will offer food concessions, dining, banquets, meeting space, tons of photographs and heritage memorabilia inside the lodge, and just another great venue with public lavatories even.
The next stop on the tour was the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. This 120-acre site will soon be home to the University of Buffalo's $375 million medical school and Kaleida Health's $250 million children's hospital. But the building behind me, the $291 million Gates Vascular Institute, is already changing the face of medicine. I'm here with Chief Operating Officer of the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, Pat Whalen. Now, Pat, the way this building, the Gates Vascular Institute, is designed is to foster interaction and cooperation between doctors and other hospital staff. How has that changed the medical industry in the Buffalo area?
Well, it's changed the medical industry worldwide, really. The idea is the brainchild of Dr. Nick Hopkins, who works here in the building, longtime Buffalo neurosurgeon, and he had a vision to bring different practices together. So neurosurgery, cardio, radiologists, and vascular surgeons together in the same physical space so they can interact with each other and therefore trade ideas.
Now, this has actually come into practice once with one particular patient who was able to save many surgical procedures by just two doctors interacting. Am I right?
Correct. So traditionally what happened is in the old Gates Hospital, as an example, these doctors, these areas were in different floors. So the doctors very rarely interacted, maybe at a staff meeting or something like that, but in practice they didn't interact with each other. First week in this building when it was open, there was a neural surgery taking place, and the surgeon couldn't get to the brain through the vascular system because of a blockage somewhere else. So rather than closing the patient back up, sending him home, and rescheduling, the doctor went next door to a vascular surgeon and said, "Can you come over here and get this blockage out of the way so I can finish my job?" The vascular surgeon came over, removed the blockage, the neurosurgeon finished his job, the patient went home with one visit.
Now, one of the advantages of having everything under one roof is that if a doctor has an idea, he can turn that idea into reality, right?
That gets into the space we're in here called the Jacobs Institute. Everything below us is actually Gates Hospital. Everything above us is UB's Clinical Translational Research Center. Most of the doctors that teach at UB practice at Kaleida or vice versa. So as a surgeon is performing his duties downstairs in the hospital and he has an idea to do something differently, he can actually go upstairs to his lab and model the device he has in mind on a CAD program. If that works out, and it looks like it's going to work, at least in the electronic version of it, he can actually come down to this floor and where there's a fab shop and actually fabricate his idea. So they can actually move the process along here much quicker because they're in the same building.
And then you can even link him with a private investor who might take that idea to the market.
Right. So the idea then, if the idea looks like it's going to work, it can actually do a first-in-human trial. And the Jacobs Institute, there's people here that can expedite that process, work with the FDA, and get the first-in-trial test approved. And if that works, we can actually have a product that goes to market and do human trials. Now, most doctors, not all, but most doctors don't want to start a company. So how do they take their medical device and commercialize it? At the Jacobs Institute, there are people here that can help with that process, either find investors or find, if the doctor wants to start his own company, or perhaps find a successful entrepreneur that's been successful in another medical device thing and had an exit and now is looking to do it again. Find that guy, match the two of them up, and commercialize the product. So we actually want to start companies in this building. There's a UB incubator on this floor, so the doctor could actually start a company, incubate it here, and then hopefully grow the business.
So part of the goal of having all these organizations and facilities in one central spot is to spur this economic growth on the private sector side, correct?
Exactly. So that's a big part of what the Jacobs Institute is about. that's a big part of what my job every day is about here on the campus, is fostering the growth of private sector companies. So the other building we have on the other end of the campus, called the Innovation Center, is a place for private sector companies as they grow in the incubator here, and they outgrow that incubator space, which is quite small, so it doesn't take long to outgrow that. But down the street we have the Innovation Center, which actually has a lot more space and a lot more services available to help grow these early stage companies.
Now, with the medical school and the new children's hospital coming, there's going to be a lot of growth in this campus. How important is it to have the Metro Rail right at your doorstep?
Well, access is another big part of my job. How do people get to the medical campus? We have plenty of parking for patients and their visitors, family, things like that. But having the employees get here every day is a bit more of a challenge. And to that extent, having the subway station on the campus is a huge, huge opportunity for us. So I think we're going to see that the Metro line really starts to fulfill the promise that it had 30 years ago when it was first envisioned.
And you think this medical campus can be a driving force behind creating a new economy for the Buffalo region?
Yeah, I think we'll see, and we're already seeing, a lot of private sector development and housing along the subway line. So we already see it happening. Obviously, I think that's going to drive residents back to the city. People are going to want to live in the city, want to live, work, and play in the city, and a lot of them will work here on the medical campus.
The last stop on the tour was right here in Larkinville. Once known as the Hydraulics, this was the first manufacturing district in what was then the village of Buffalo. It's named after the Larkin Soap Company, at one point the world's largest mail-order retailer, also known for commissioning Frank Lloyd Wright to design its administration building. Then, tough times came upon this neighborhood. The business went bankrupt shortly after the Depression, and Frank Lloyd Wright's masterpiece was demolished in 1950. The surrounding area also declined, and just over a decade ago, it was virtually completely abandoned. That's when Howard Zemsky purchased the Larkin warehouse you see behind me and renovated into Class A office space. Residential, retail, and recreational development followed, and now this burgeoning neighborhood is one of Buffalo's biggest success stories. Before you renovated the Larkin building, this area was left for dead. How can other areas of the city replicate the success that you've had here in Larkinville?
You know, we had a vision and confidence, I think, in the people of Buffalo, who have a tremendous pride in their history and a lot of aspiration for the future. And actually, I think you're seeing a lot of that right now in Buffalo, whether you're talking about the West Side, the medical campus, the waterfront, Larkinville. You know, there's a ton of interest in people working downtown and moving downtown. And I think that's only going to continue. I think we're going to continue to rediscover, for example, historic neighborhoods, whether there's the old First Ward, old Hydraulic District neighborhoods, Larkinville neighborhoods. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think all the residential developers I talked to downtown all wish they had another 100 units to rent or sell. So I think we hit that tipping point. More and more people are interested in doing development and relocating here, living and working. So I'm very, excited about what I see. I've lived in Buffalo 32 years. I don't think there's been a better time to be in Buffalo in terms of our prospects.
What's next for Larkinville?
We're going to continue to actually add to the residential component down here. So we've started rehabbing some historic buildings and put residential on the top floors. We recently bought the former Larkin Men's Club building. We're going to do 6 to 8 apartments in there. Recently, we engaged with the University of Buffalo School of Urban Design, UB Regional Institute, to work on the next iteration of our master plan, which we did with them 6 or 7 years ago. We kind of checked off all the boxes on what we wanted to accomplish. So now we're re-engaging in terms of master planning for the district. So I expect to see more residential, more retail, more restaurants, and just the continued growth of the Larkin Square programming, concerts, author series, things of that nature.
Now, you're also co-chair of the Regional Economic Council that's tasked with creating a plan for Governor Cuomo's billion-dollar pledge to Buffalo. What sectors of the economy are you focused on in order to spur economic growth?
Yeah, so there's three primary sectors of the economy we're focused on with respect to the Buffalo Billion. That would be the life science economy and leveraging the tremendous public resources that have gone into the medical campus. Tourism, where we have over 50,000 people employed in that industry, and that really leverages the asset of Niagara Falls and the amazing art and architecture of Buffalo. And advanced manufacturing, where again we have over 50,000 people employed in that sector. We have over 1,700 small and medium manufacturers, and the concept of producing here, exporting beyond Western New York, and importing, in essence, the associated dollars and jobs attached to that, very traditional wealth-creating industries, is really our focus. So three sectors: tourism, life sciences, and advanced manufacturing, not to the exclusion of the other sectors of the economy, but if you're asking what are we really highlighting and focusing, it's those three sectors of the economy.
Now, you also mentioned the focus on the city. How has sprawl affected the community, especially in consideration of the population loss we've experienced?
So we have the unfortunate distinction of being the only region in New York State out of the 10 regions that has lost population over the last several decades, while simultaneously occupying 2.5 times the landmass. So we have like almost 600 miles of more roads than we used to with less population. We continue to duplicate services, costly infrastructure, maintenance, and in the process, we've made it harder in some ways for people to get to work, to use public transportation, and if we're not careful about reversing that, we'll continue to embed poverty, make it difficult to get to work for people who don't have cars, and we're missing out on creating that vitality and density that young people are looking for, people who have options where to go. We need to create compelling, vital downtowns for them. Nobody graduates college and says, where is there the greatest sprawl? That's where I want to go. They want to know job opportunities, waterfront, public transportation, cool restaurants, other young people, cultural activities, recreational activities. So we're very focused on, the vitality and vibrancy of downtown as an important part of our economic development strategy. So we're all about trying to reverse those trends of sprawl. You're going to see us support lots of projects in the city and really concentrate investment in the city.
Now, Moody's and Standard & Poor were just here to take a tour of Buffalo. Have you heard from other people around the nation about the success we've had in the city?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Buffalo, I think, has really emerged on the national radar screen. We just hosted, through the Community Foundation, a number of national foundations just yesterday who are interested in what's going on in Buffalo. And they're reading about it, they're hearing about it, this whole new approach to economic development and all the positive things that are going on in the city, be it the waterfront, the medical campus, revitalization of old neighborhoods. So we've definitely emerged as a hip, happening city with traction and vision. So I think we're excited about that. And like I started out saying, I think the prospects for Buffalo, from where I sit, having been here for 30 some odd years, have never looked better.
Hi, welcome back. Now, in addition to these exciting projects that we learned about in this video, since this was broadcast on our show, there's been another very exciting announcement. The governor was in town and announced a $1.7 billion high-tech clean energy campus in South Buffalo called Riverbend. Now, not only will this include a $225 million investment by the state, but a $1.5 billion private investment by two leading companies in the clean energy business will be invested in Buffalo to try to reform the economy and make it based on the high-tech, cutting-edge, and sustainable sectors of the economy moving forward.
No question, Patrick, and this is where I really would like to publicly congratulate Governor Andrew Cuomo. The rating agency Moody's actually called this a credit positive by the infusing this amount of money into this project in Buffalo, and in a public-private way that will create 500 jobs, I believe, early on, and then it's endless in terms of over the next decade or so. So it's going to be very, very, very helpful. But I will tell you, when we brought the rating agencies here, and we're in an A category, it's a good thing. And you kind of gave the report of the amount of money. But this now catapults us to another level. The mayor, throughout his campaign for re-election, talked about the city's amount of money that they've put into Buffalo. I think he used the number 2.2 billion. And so many of our neighborhoods in the councilmanic districts, they're saying, well, that's good. We're glad that Buffalo and downtown and the waterfront is doing good. But what about us? What about our neighborhoods? That puts us now in a perfect position. I think the mayor realizes it. I think the Common Council realizes that we have to begin to infuse dollars and monies into the neighborhoods, the business districts, to complement what's been going on the waterfront and in our downtown area.
Now, one of the reasons the rating agencies is so interested in Buffalo's economic progress is that they use that as a factor when giving us our credit rating, our bond rating, and we're in the A category with all three rating agencies. Now, that rating is important because that decides the interest rate at which you can borrow funds.
Right.
Now, because of the city's excellent credit rating, A category across the board, you've undergone an aggressive campaign to refinance the city's debt at lower interest rates than was previously borrowed at. So in the first 2 years you were in office, this aggressive campaign to refinance the city's debt has resulted in $62 million in savings for taxpayers, which would normally go towards interest costs, and it's going to come back to the taxpayers, and those are interest costs that they won't have to make because of these refinances.
Exactly, Patrick, and I'm very, very proud of the entire office and the Comptroller's office, but especially Ann Forti-Sciarrino, my first deputy, and then a deputy comptroller over in debt management, Greg Szymanski, certified public accountant. And so we've done a very, very good job. And also, $52 million is actually in the 5-year plan that the Buffalo Public Schools are using to actually go forward. That was because of the refinancing, the refunding that we did. So you're right, over the last 2 years, we've had opportunities, we've done the best we can, and there are real results for the future.
Now, in addition to refinancing debt, you've also gone to the bond market to borrow for capital projects moving forward. Now, normally the city would just borrow funds in a regular bond. This year, you took a different approach. You did a bond anticipation note,
right,
which reduces dramatically the amount of interest the city's pays for this debt to 1/3%. And this will allow you to identify the projects that are ready to go and spend the funds right away, and the funds that weren't ready to be spent, you don't have to borrow for right away.
Yeah.
So this is a part of your effort to remake the capital improvement process and try to make sure that we're not borrowing funds right off the bat and have money sitting in bank accounts waiting to be spent. You're only borrowing funds for projects that are ready. And if they're not ready, you're not going to borrow the funds.
Yeah.
And you won't borrow it until the project is ready to go.
My feeling, Patrick, is that the citizens of Buffalo have elected me, and they know that I'm not afraid and we're going to do the right thing. And also they know that over the last 7 or 8 years, there has been a control board, mostly a hard control board, which has gone soft the last year or so. And so I was in a position to kind of turn City Hall upside down. And that's exactly what we've done. We are only going to the market to borrow if they can prove to me, the city, the administration, the Commissioner of Public Works, all of the council members, that you can spend that money within that year. If you can't, I'm not going to the market because all it does is have higher costs to the citizens, and I refuse to do it. And when we did the ban last year, $17.9 million ban, we actually borrowed it for nearly nothing.
Right.
It was 0.33%. It's like getting free money, which somebody pointed out to me in my office. And so it's a good thing. And so there are capital improvements that need to be done throughout the city of Buffalo, but if the administration can't do it in a timely way, we're not going to go to the market for the larger amount, because all it does is creates more money the citizens of Buffalo has to pay long term.
Now, you took an innovative approach to capital borrowing. You also took an innovative approach to managing the city's investments. Now, the West Seneca School District and the City of Buffalo entered into an agreement which you spearheaded, which doubles the amount of interest the city gets on their investment. It's called a tax anticipation note.
Right.
And whereas the City of Buffalo invested in the West Seneca School District, and after they borrowed the money, they paid the city back with interest.
Yeah.
Now, that was double the rate that the city was getting in its money market account.
Right.
So with that under your belt, you went to look even better deal, and you found one in Orange County, New York, the Curious Joel School District.
Right.
And you lent that district money, the city's money, and at a rate of 1.25%, which is 5 times the amount of interest the city would be earning in its money market bank accounts.
Right.
So just that one transaction with Curious Joel is enough to net the city $50,000. That's like putting an extra police officer on the street just by switching from one investment to another.
Yeah, and you know, Patrick, I can't really take credit for it. This was something that was done in the 1950s by Comptroller Chester Cole. He didn't exactly do it the way that we've done it, but we have an opportunity right now. But I was very curious about the idle funds, and that's what his hallmark was when he was comptroller. And you're exactly right. We've done 2 deals so far, which has yielded the city of Buffalo nearly $70,000, which goes into the fund balance, into the coffers, which can be used to pay for a firefighter or a police officer. And so we're going to continue to do that. And at some point in time, we're getting good at this now. We've already done 2 deals. We're going to continue to do it. It's a good thing for the school district, whether it's West Seneca, Curious Joel, and Orange County.
They get a better interest rate than they would get from a bank, so
Right.
it's a win-win situation.
It's all monitored by the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli's office.
Who heavily scrutinize the deal and make sure that both parties get a good deal in this,
Yeah.
and that it's nothing risky with the taxpayer dollars. It's completely safe investment.
It's a win-win for everybody. We will continue to do it, and as comptroller, I will not take even a calculated risk. I am going to do things like this that brings revenue into the city of Buffalo, and we're very, very proud of this idle fund opportunity.
Now, earlier in the show, you mentioned the Rowan Award. That was a ceremony you did recently, but you also had a second part where you unveiled the newest portion of the Hall of Controllers. Now, the Hall of Controllers is an exhibit that was originally started by Comptroller Bob Whalen back in the 1980s, where each controller got a portrait sketched of them and hung up in the controller's office. And you noticed that it stopped after Comptroller Whalen.
Yeah.
So you went back and you had a very talented artist on your staff, Joanne Miliotto, who's in the Investment and Debt Management Office, and she did sketch of the 3 missing controllers.
Right.
Comptroller Anthony Nunula, Comptroller Joel Giambra, and Comptroller Andy Sanfilippo. And you unveiled these portraits with Joanne at a ceremony recently in the Comptroller's office. So the Comptroller's Hall of Fame is totally up to date.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it, and I know, Patrick, that this is our last segment. So before I kind of comment on that, I just really would like to thank everybody here at the Apollo, the personnel, Tom and Alan and Rob, for the courtesies that they've given us for us to be able to communicate to the citizens of Buffalo. And this is the place that we come each and every month. And they are real professionals and they do a wonderful job. The Comptroller's Hall is something that Bob Whalen started. We've completed it by putting those 3 illustrations done by an employee of Debt Management, Joanne Miliotto. And we invited Comptrollers Nanula Chiambra and Andy Sanfilippo to our offices last week. They came with their families. All 3 of them were given an opportunity to speak to our employees, especially those employees who've been there a long time, and those new employees, to kind of hear what their initiatives were and how serious they were about doing a good job for the citizens of Buffalo. It was absolutely tremendous. I'm glad we did it, and we will continue to stay focused on giving attention to those people who serve the citizens of Buffalo.
Well, thanks, Mark. We ran out of time next year for next year's annual report. Maybe we should do a 2-hour special.
Perfect.
So thanks for joining us on Comptroller's Corner, and thanks at home for joining us on this annual report. Remember to check out our YouTube page and our Facebook page and our Twitter account, and of course the City of Buffalo's website at city-buffalo.com/comptroller. For Mark Schroeder, this is Pat Curry signing off.